Hi, I'm Rob DeMarco, a freelance journalist. I'd like to welcome you all here. Today I'm at Right Turn with Gabrielle Dean, Clinical Director. I'd like to thank you for meeting with me. Okay, I just have a couple of questions, but feel free to, just go wherever the wind takes you if there's an issue. Okay, this is the first question. What is some of your background?
I am a social worker with a public health degree, which means that not only do you study individual issues, you study health issues. And I learned substance abuse is a public health issue. My background was primarily mental health, but I loved working with adolescents. And when you work with adolescents, you end up working with addictions, though not everybody knows that. So. It was kind of a natural thing to go into the addictions field. I've been working as a mental health clinician for about 25 years.
Now, do you find that sometimes maybe that's how it can start? Kids when they're teenagers, they just feel that, they want to experiment and it just gets to be too much. And
I think very few kids who experiment, unless there's a predisposition or an underlying issue, really, get caught up in addiction. There's usually something underneath that's feeding it. And when you interview kids about why they use drugs, it's not the peer stuff. It's not the, I wanted to be cool. It's more that they're miserable, and it's a way of being less miserable.
You wouldn't think that. You would think that it's more of I want to be cool, I want to be part of the in crowd rather than...
Right. It often, like when they find their substance, it's all about, it made me feel whole, it made me feel loved, it made me feel all the things they're not feeling.
How did you meet the CEO and founder?
Woody, I think we've always known each other. No, Woody and I interviewed for a job about 12 years ago, maybe a little more. I interviewed for a job where he was working at the time because a friend of ours, who's currently our medical director, it was a mutual friend, and so I interviewed for a job. I did not take the job, but when Woody decided he wanted to start Right Turn, he called me and he said, "Abby, I need help." I said, "Doing what?" He said, "I don't know." So it was great. We really, we all both have the same philosophy of treatment, which is you do it, you're nice to people. If people are struggling, you don't kick them out because, if somebody's diabetic and their sugars are out of control, you get them more services rather than less. So it's kind of the same idea. So if someone's falling apart and using, instead of kicking them out, we try to get them into more intensive treatment and then we'll take them back. You can't punish people for their symptoms.
That's amazing that you guys came back around. I mean, after so many years like that.
Yeah, no, we met, and it turns out that we had met before. We had a mutual friend who we went to birthday parties together, but we hadn't kind of put that together until after he said, "Come fix this."
And that's great about the fact that rather than kicking people out, you're very welcoming. You help them get themselves together rather than saying, you're just going to have to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, that's tough. Nobody wants to be an addict.
Can you go into a little bit about maybe where you worked before?
I started and ran a residential program. I had a basic mental health background, and then I started and ran a residential program for opiate addicted women and their children. And that was amazing, and it was a federal grant, and I did that for a few years. And then I ran a women's program, which is just 21 women living in a residential program, and those were both substance abuse programs. But before that, I did a lot of outpatient therapy with kids and adults, but mostly adolescents. So, my background is really in treatment.
How many years have you been aiding in the journey towards recovery for people that are suffering?
Let me see. I think officially for about 15. 20 I've been in this field. But I mean, whatever you work in the social work field, you end up working with addiction. And I think once you realize that it's not anybody's fault. Nobody's sitting around trying to be an addict.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been 15 years, something like that, maybe 20.
Wow. And that is very true. I'm sure kids don't grow up and say, boy, I really want to be an addict when I grow up, or, that's just my dream. Yeah.
Right, and genetics, genetics are part of it, and depression and, anxiety and all the other things kids are trying to treat, or, major mental illnesses as well.
Okay, let's move into another area.
Cool.
Can you tell us a little in depth about the programs that your center offers?
Let me see, Right Turn started out when we opened the doors with one group, and it was the Thursday night Artists in Recovery group. People said they wanted a group where they could get support from other artists, but they didn't want it to be religious, and they didn't want it to be exactly like AA, because if you want to go to AA or NA, you can go to AA or NA. So it got created, and then we started, next we added lunchtime groups, drop-in, people would come in. We started adding staffs, and that's the past 9 years or 10 years. What we have now is we have a small continuum of care. If somebody wants to come in and get therapy and deal with, their substance abuse, that's fine. Want to come in once a week, that's great. But then we have a medication-assisted treatment program, which is to come in once a week. They get prescriptions. They go to some groups, and and they have a therapist. So the medication-assisted treatment program. Next level up, if you need more than that, is an intensive outpatient program, which just recently went to 5 days a week from 4. So people can come in at 9, have breakfast, and hang out here until 1, except Friday till 1:30 because there's a drum group. We end each week with a drum group.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then if you're a man and you need more support, we have on top of that you can do residential treatment. Not residential treatment, a transitional housing that first starts coupled with the intensive outpatient program, and then hopefully people get jobs and get their own apartments and stay around. And the nice thing we have is we have alumni groups every day at lunchtime. If you can come during the day, you can come to an alumni group. We've had people come like a year and a half later and just show up. So it's always open. We also have a lot of programming on the weekends. So we don't run it all. We run some of it, but we have self-help groups here, many different kinds, not just the anonymous groups, but other ones as well. And on Saturday night, we have music. Every Saturday night, there's an open mic here. You should come.
Great.
Right? Yeah.
I think that's awesome that you guys rock the house at least once a week.
Yeah, once a week. So Saturday night, and all summer, it's just open mic, and then towards the fall, they book acts also that come in. It's great. I've seen some amazing people here, and some very well-known people come through here. And then we have a radio show on and off. We've had it for about 5 years, which, that's Sunday nights, and then during the weekend there's also anonymous meetings. So if you want to, if coming to the same place makes it work better for you, you can come here 7 days a week. I try not to, but some weeks I've been here 7 days a week.
But it must be very fulfilling. To know that with what you're doing here is so amazing.
Thank you.
To have a community where musicians can come, and it's not one size fits all. It's not traditional. It's something new and exciting, and you can get the help you need and be creative. I just think that's wonderful.
That's great. The other night, probably about a month ago, Woody and I both hadn't discussed it, but one of our colleagues was playing in a band with, a bunch of his hit, and they were playing here, and we looked in the audience, and it was like, wow, we have helped a good percentage of the people in this audience, and that is just wonderful.
because I think that's very cool. I mean, you don't see a lot of treatment centers that do that, where they cater to a particular, someone in need, where it's just for them, and that's what it focuses on, and I think you guys are one of the very few people that do that. I just think that's awesome.
Well, you know what? I mean, a lot of people go to an AA meeting. Sorry, I don't need to. Any anonymous meeting and say, "Oh, these aren't my people." And by saying, "Okay, if you're creative," so we have writers and poets and artists, and and sculptors and musicians, that a lot of them just they look, and so all of a sudden they're a little more likely to be their people. So it's like when you're first going into treatment and first going to a meeting, you're scared, and you come here and it's like, okay, well, at least we can talk about music. I mean, and we try to, at the beginning of every week, we have a theme for the week, like, usually, like last week it was gratitude, and the week before, honesty, a theme, and kind of work off of it, and then we have an icebreaker question at the beginning of each week, and, this week was, state your name and state how long you've been here and what was your favorite sitcom growing up. So you get to know little things about people, and you can there's other ways to form relationships.
Yeah. Break the ice, something new rather than your basic standard questions.
Or, hi, I'm, Joe, and I'm, an addict. And, we also believe in focusing on people's strengths and their health. Addiction is something that nobody's particularly proud of. So if they say, hi, I'm Joe, and, my favorite one we've ever asked was, if you had a superpower, what would it be? And, people would say, oh, I'd like to fly, I'd like to be invisible. And it was just wonderful, because it's just a different way of looking at the world.
That's a really, really interesting and eye-opening question. If somebody asked me that, I don't know what would be, I don't know what would be my question for that.
It's a mom answer. I wanted to be two places at the same time. That's what, I could be here and I could be there.
When a person in need of treatment enters this program, how many weeks is it?
We hope that people, at least for the IOP and the residential treatment program, but probably anywhere, needs to really commit to at least 3 months of treatment. I really think, research shows the longer you're in treatment, the better off you are. If you're in treatment for 5 days, the chances of staying sober are pretty slender. Ideally it would be a year, but nobody can afford to give up a year of their life. Very few people.
Well, I think that's great that it's 3 months, so it gives them the stabilization and the background so that they can stay more healthy and substance-free.
Right, and we're always here. So, if people, they can give us, and then 3 months, and then they go back to work, they can still come in the evenings, and they can come to the other meetings, so they still can be part of the community.
That's great. So with the housing for Right Turn, how does that work?
It's a beautiful house on church property, so it's in the old parsonage, and it's just a beautiful house that we renovated, and it houses 6 to 7 men. 3 rooms are singles, 2 rooms are doubles. They cook their own meals. They keep the house clean whenever. It's usually really, really spotless, which is really surprising to me. There's also a garden outside, which is very much a part of it's like, because it's a beautiful old, outdoor area that's kind of enclosed. There's a garden, and there's a barbecue, and there's a little, fire pit kind of thing. So it's wonderful. So what a typical day for a guy on the weekdays, they get up, they come here for the IOP if they're not working, then they go work out at a gym, they eat lunch and work out at a gym, or work out at a gym and then eat lunch, and then go back to the house where they have 2 or 3 hours where they have to do cooking, or they have to do chores, or they just get downtime or look for a job or something, and then they have dinner and a meeting. So it's and the weekends are a little lower structure, and families come in once a week, but we think that it's this one opportunity. People have given up all this time we should try to get them as much exposure to recovery as possible.
Cool. Okay. I just had an epiphany. How is it for a person in recovery when they're here, but then they go out and they're looking for jobs, and they're out into the jungle where everything that they were protected from, they're out in the midst of?
Right, it's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, what we really try to do is get them at job hunting and hopefully even working before they leave.
Oh.
So that then they can, you can go, you go and you have that paycheck in your pocket, but you're going back to your safe environment. We try to do that for as long as they possibly can. Because, here you have that money in your pocket, and, what are you going to do? Are you going to set up that bank account for direct deposit, or are you going to spend it on drugs and alcohol, or whatever your addiction is? So we really try to help with the transition. We also hope that we also encourage people, if they want, they can settle nearby, because then they can continue, like, with the same therapist after they are discharged from the house. They can. We have alumni night on Thursday night, which is burrito night.
Ooh, yeah, burritos, all right.
Homemade burritos, all different flavors. It's wonderful. But so burrito night, people come back and, hang out, and they're welcome to hang out. The other aspect of the house that's really nice is there's a lot of music. Not everybody's musical, but there's a lot of music. So, in the basement, there's an entire, studio and drum kits. Lots of, and there's, bass and keyboards and stuff, and there's a lot of music that goes on in the house.
That's great. I was going to ask you that, if people bring their gear or if...
Yeah, we have some people say, I'm going to bring a few guitars. We're like, start with one. One's a good start. We've got plenty around here. And we just recently, somebody who had died in treatment somewhere else, they donated a keyboard to us and the bass, because they wanted to keep even though he was no longer alive and there were no family members.
Keep the music going.
Yeah, keep the music going.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be tough for me if I was traveling somewhere to just take one thing, since, I have many, and I just feel like I can't part with any of them.
But they can come later. But let's make sure it's all going to work out before you bring your guitars.
Have you seen addicts that come for treatment that have a family history of it a lot, or has it been a small percentage?
Well, it's really interesting, because they do statistics saying 1 in 10 people, has an addiction problem at some point in your life, and if you do them, and then it's like, well, 1 in 4 people has an addicted family member. Well, do the math. 1 in 4 people. Everybody knows somebody in their family.
There's got to be some.
Everybody
more
has
than that.
Uncle something, but it's really hard. It's really hard to find an addicted person who doesn't have addiction in their family. Currently I don't see many people who aren't addicted to do a comparison, but yes, addiction seems to have some kind of genetic component. I just read a book called Clean, highly recommended, by David Sheff. It's a great book.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, no, he wrote Beautiful Boy, which is about his child's addiction, and what he did is kind of write the book that everybody should read about addiction. And he got rid of he kind of finally figures out there's no one to blame. And he really looks at it. Researchers feel that it's about 50% genetic, that family members. So yes, everybody has somewhere in their family somebody they can find who has an addiction.
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and it segues into what we talked about before. Do you find that if a family member has an addiction and they come here for treatment, that other family members might realize that they have it too and decide to come and get treatment together?
We had somebody who, I don't remember, one person who the whole family was pointing at one member of the family saying, I think his addiction's returned. And he said, no. And he was right. He wasn't active again. But one of the other family members called and said, hi, I have an addiction. So he came in. Yeah, it happens. I think I've also had the other thing where a kid comes in to get sober and the parent who is still drinking or drugging continues, and that makes success a lot harder unless they move out.
That seems like unbelievable. How can you support somebody in recovery if you're drinking or popping pills or shooting stuff in your arm? You're basically just thumbing your nose at the person.
It's not really thumbing your nose. It's that you're in a lot, you're
not supporting.
You're in better denial than they are, I guess. I mean, it's really tough because it's, what would you have to address, if you're, in your 50s and 60s and your 20-year-old kid's getting better, then you have to look at what you're not doing.
And some of those people don't want to do it, so...
Or they can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think most people can't. Because I think, everybody wants to be better than who they are. Just some people, the addiction's winning. I kind of, when I ask people, I'm like, how are you? Are you winning or is the addiction winning? Mm-hmm. And in families, even if a parent is still using, they really want their kid to get better, even if they can't do it themselves.
It's just a shame that it might make it more tough for the person
who's
trying to do that when,
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, the person, I can think of many who come in my office. Some where they're like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's only pot and alcohol. Which if you're trying to get sober, it's pot and alcohol and it's still a problem. And there's some people who say, okay, I'll make sure that, he can't get at any of the alcohol.
Okay, this ties into the theme of Right Turn and some of the work that you guys do. I'd like to mention a few musicians here and maybe get your thoughts on them. Mm-hmm. As we know, there are musicians now that are pinnacles of sobriety and shows that they can work. I'm just going to mention a few. I've mentioned more in my travels, and I mentioned some others with Woody, but I have some different ones for you, so it's not exactly the same. Let's go with Stevie Nicks, and then we have.
I read her thing about she was addicted to antidepressants.
Yeah, and she used to. I believe it was cocaine.
Yeah, and then antidepressants. Yeah. I think that coming out as a famous person, being sober is very scary. Because what happens if you relapse? She was in People magazine talking about it. If she relapses, everybody will know she relapses. Stuff.
What about Ringo Starr or like Richie Zambora or like Joe Perry from Aerosmith and Steven Tyler? I mean, some of those guys, you never thought they were going to get sober, and they proved that, that they were going to do it, and it worked. Mm-hmm.
I think that the more people who are famous and get sober and talk about it makes it less shameful for the people who aren't famous, who aren't, they have everything they want and they've decided that their life is a mess because of their addiction. Maybe I can do it too. I just hope. I just hope that people, along with, when people die of their addiction, you just really, really hope that it gets the word out.
Yeah, although, you see people that have died in the past, and, you would think it would wake people up, but I guess sometimes it doesn't, Whether it's a famous musician or just your next door neighbor or whatever, it's a shame that people don't realize that, your addiction can kill you.
Yeah, and it's pretty lethal. Yeah, it is. People who are, in denial can say things like, well, look at her, she was, and it's easy to keep yourself away, but maybe it helps a few. Maybe, I think like Amy Winehouse dying of alcohol poisoning, I don't think people even think of that as a possibility of something that can kill you.
Well, I think probably people think of it being just as die of alcohol poisoning. John Belushi, probably people feel it's more towards drugs than alcohol.
It's really interesting, yeah. We know John Belushi's wife. Mm-hmm. We interviewed her on the radio once, and they asked her, I don't know who asked, we asked her when did you realize that John had a problem? And she said, after he died. And I thought that was just amazing. I mean, because it was part of the life. You just keep using and using and using and using. And he did it more than the rest of them, I guess, she realized. But, you know, nobody knew it was a problem back then.
Well, I guess it was part of culture. I mean, if you look at the older Saturday Night Live, I mean, when I was doing research in this area, I read a lot and looked at a lot of documentaries and other things, and one of the things that they showed were clips of Saturday Night Live, and it's just amazing how it was all out there, and it was so acceptable and everything. And I'm sure if a person wanted to hide it, I mean, they could. I mean, I didn't realize the grip of his addiction, and I was a fan of the Blues Brothers for years, and stuff. I was even, there was a costume party when I was in junior high, and one of my teachers that I'm still friendly with, we were the Blues Brothers, and we won first prize. I was actually one of the only guys with the real sideburns. Every other guy had it markered on. And I've been to that House of Blues a number of times in Florida and in LA and everything. But before I started researching it, I really didn't realize the grip of his addiction.
Right, and it's one of the things that happens with fame is even if you're trying to give it up, everybody wants to be your friend and they give it to you.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, look, I get to party with this famous person if I bring cocaine or I bring opiates or whatever they're doing. And, it's a crazy lifestyle. You know, it's not reasonable. You know, you're on the, you know, if you're a musician, you're on the road a lot. You know, it's just, I think, and where do most people start their careers? Stand-up comedy clubs sell alcohol, and you know, most musicians start in bars, you know, where even if they can't pay you, they'll give you free beer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a tough, being creative and in recovery is tough.
Can you tell us a little bit about the fundraising that you have and some of the events that you do?
Oh yeah, we've had some great events over the years. We have, our first fundraiser was a bunch of drummers. We had Chad Smith from Red Hot Chili Peppers and Simon Kirke from Bad Company, who I used to love when I was a youngin'. I just loved that band. And, you know, we've had Chuck Berry come in and perform for us. We have a super group often where we take a bunch of really interesting musicians and have them play all sorts of wonderful music. You know, sometimes with 2 or 3 drummers. We seem to be heavy on drummers.
Oh, that's like the Allman Brothers. Cool.
Yeah, so those are fun. The super groups are fun. We also we've had, like, the Del Fuegos got back together for us. That was a blast. That was a lot of fun. It was on my birthday. A friend of mine said, remember that year that the Del Fuegos got together for your birthday? Not quite the same.
Now, in my research, I did listen to some of the Del Fuegos, and I got to tell you, they had an amazing sound. It was very much of the 60s, the surfer sound. It was really cool.
Yeah. I don't tell anybody, but I didn't know the Del Fuegos. I've heard their music, but they weren't who I was listening to back then. But don't tell Woody.
All right, well, I'll just cut that part out.
No,
cut that part out of the interview.
He knows. It's one of my favorite things about us. You know, it's like, oh yeah, the Del Fuegos. And when I've heard their songs, it's like, yeah, I've heard them before. But I was more of a folky.
Some of the people that I talked to had heard of the Del Fuegos, and other people hadn't, and then they went to discover them, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they're great. That was great. So we've had a lot of good music. We've had some art shows. We had a poetry reading. We had a sober hip hop fest. That was pretty cool. Lots of comedy. That's the one thing. We end up with a lot of comics around here. Lots of very, very funny people. And there's a group that got formed because of their association with Right Turn called Comics for Recovery, and they kind of, you know, they go out and do sober comic events and kind of promote each other. So, yeah, and we've a lot of music.
So what was your musical taste? I know you said you weren't into...
I was more of a folky.
Bob Dylan?
Well, yeah.
Baez.
Kind of singer-songwriters of the
Richie
80s.
Havens?
Oh, I love Richie Havens.
You'd be interested in this. You must know who Arlo Guthrie is.
Yeah.
Right? When I was in my preteens, which was a long time ago, I went to a craft fair with my mom and some of my friends were there, and this guy came and he was setting up. They had bales of hay and they brought out the gear and everything, and it was Arlo Guthrie. He played for like almost 2 hours. It was amazing.
That was the first concert I ever went to. Arlo Guthrie and who was the other one? What's her name? Collins. Judy Collins.
Really?
It was like, wow, the first concert I must have been 8 years old. Maybe 10. Yeah, so that was fun.
But Arlo still looked the same, had the long hair,
Yep.
the mustache.
He sounds the same
and
too.
everything. Oh, yeah. His voice hasn't changed.
Yeah, so I grew up on more folky.
Cool. Well, since we're in the midst of the interview, and this is very much free-flowing, is there anything that you'd like to bring up? Any issues that you feel passionate about? I mean, you deal with this every day, so if there's anything that you just want to jump in and talk about.
Well, one of the things I personally love is my work with women in recovery. I think creative women, are wonderful. We have these incredibly talented women who come through here, from the age of, we treat people from 18 and to, 80. We have a poet who's 80 and wonderful, and she comes and shares her stuff, and then we have these incredibly talented young women also. And I think women in treatment are underrepresented because women hide it better, I think, or they don't get in as much trouble with it early. And I think that women need to feel free to get more help. And our common referral we get here is somebody calls and says, my son is in trouble. And there must be plenty of daughters who are in trouble, who people are just thinking they're depressed or there's something else wrong.
Well, they're heading down the river denial, that just teenage angst or whatever.
Yeah, something's wrong. She seems really sad. She's hiding in her room. She's, maybe her boyfriend's not being nice to her. So I think girls hide it better.
And maybe the parents will maybe absentee, and they just think, they're just going through stuff or whatever.
I also think boys tend to be louder.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, they tend to get in big fights, and girls probably better at hiding. Yeah. So I like working with women in treatment. But one of the things that I love about this job is, especially here, is, it'll be really, really stressful. And then someone will start playing the piano. And we had, 2 Thursdays ago, some of the guys were writing a song. And so you're sitting here and you're feeling like everything's terrible, and then they're playing this beautiful song about recovery, and it's like, oh yeah, this is great. This works. Yeah, the creative piece is wonderful. If you look around, there's art here. We have an art therapist, and she comes in, she'll say, well, I wanted people to, do a self-portrait of themselves as a tree. And, some people will talk about, I'm stronger than I look, and all these beautiful things that are also talking about themselves. And, by using creativity, you can get to other parts of people, you get to kind of the emotional parts that are hidden from their verbal parts.
And touch their soul.
I hope so. Or they can share a little more piece of their soul. And if they get better, there are 2 things I like about my job. I see people at their best. I see them when they're just getting sober and they're starting to really work. And there's always hope. There's always hope. There really is. I love that there's always, everybody who comes in, this time might be the time.
Can you tell the public if somebody is in need of help, how they can reach out to you guys, or how, if they know somebody that is in need, how can they reach out? What can they do? What are the outlets?
Well, people can email us. We get a lot of emails. We're small. We're located in New England. Any help is better than no help. But if you want to get in touch with us, you go through our website.
Can you give the public the website?
It's right-turn.org. Or you can call. Just Google us, Right Turn. Sometimes it still gives you traffic directions, but if you do Right Turn Massachusetts, For a while, it was just, when we first started, it was just when you can make right on red and when you can, But, right turn in Massachusetts or right turn in recovery, you'll end up with us. And, give us a call. Even people who call from Wisconsin or LA, we try to set them up with a program. That's one of our things, is we really try to help everybody who calls.
Do you guys ever think maybe you'll do offshoots of right turn and maybe put it in different states?
Yeah, when we picture it, we picture this is kind of the perfect size, a small, intimate program that can form a healthy community. We look at maybe other creative parts of the country might be a lot of fun to do. Like where's some creative parts? Austin has good music, and New York has good music. Chicago has, it'd be fun, but it would stay small.
Well, why mess with it when you're doing great work? Keep it how it is, and just expand. But
yep, we don't need it any bigger. It works as this size.
Well, I gotta tell you, this has been amazing. Every time I come here, you feel the creative energy as soon as you walk in the door. I mean, I gravitated more towards film and documentaries as well as doing news pieces.
Yes, we have them too.
But coming in here, you just feel it as soon as you walk in the door. You were saying you have them too. What do you do? Film nights or something, or?
I don't, but we have 2 or 3 people who've been here very recently who are like film majors.
Really?
Photographers. We've had right now we have a photographer. Yeah, it's just we've had authors. It's just wonderful because creativity is a slightly different animal if you're creative. It's great fun.
Well, thank you very much for your time, and this is just amazing every time I come here. I can't tell you. I mean, this is like one of the. I think it's just absolutely amazing. This is like one of the most cool places I've ever been.
So come to our open mic nights.
Absolutely. I'm not a great musician. I'm more of a blender. Just you smile and the girls go crazy.
That's right. But if you're up on stage, it's just a lot more fun. I hear. I'm a very good member.
But thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.